Thursday. Welcome to a special live edition of the Liz Wheeler Show. We are live on YouTube. We are live on X. We are live on Facebook. Drop a wave, a little emoji in the live chat. Let me know that you're here, that you can hear me all right, that you can see me all right. Guess who has a new podcast? Guess. You can drop it in the live chat if you want. I'll give you a couple seconds. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he has a new podcast. You know, there's a joke that every white boy in America has a podcast. I guess Gavin Newsom is, just fulfilling his destiny here. But the question we should be asking is why? Why does Gavin Newsom have a podcast? His latest guest was Charlie Kirk. And I actually don't have a problem with Gavin Newsom having a podcast because I think it highlights the fact that Gavin Newsom is a liar. Gavin Newsom has been a liar for the entire tenure of his quote unquote public service since he's been a politician. He's been especially deceptive since March 19th, 2020. Who wants to guess what happened on March 19th, 2020? That was the day when I, as a California resident, I was a California resident for about 8 years, was told that I could not leave my home without a press pass. I could not go walk in the park. I could not go to the grocery store without wearing a mask. I could not do anything because I was locked down because of COVID-19. Gavin Newsom locked down the state of California and absolutely destroyed it. Restaurants were shuttered. People's businesses were closed. We weren't allowed to go to church. March 19th, 2020 is a day that should live in Gavin Newsom should be forced to stand on the street corner and hold a sign that says March 19th, 2020 for the rest of his life. He has a new podcast, though. We'll see if he talks about it. I hope he does. I hope he invites me on his podcast to talk about his COVID policies and what he stands by and what he regrets. That would be a good episode. Gavin Newsom has a podcast. And the reason why is because Gavin Newsom wants to be president of the United States. He wants to run in 2028. That's been obvious. He actually wanted to run in 2024. He wanted to be the heir to the Democrat crown. He didn't think Kamala Harris should be simply anointed as Biden's successor. Gavin Newsom wanted to run. And hey, who knows? Maybe Gavin Newsom would have done a better job than Kamala Harris, but really, wouldn't anybody have done a better job than Kamala Harris? Probably, I would argue, not to go on a tangent here, that even Joe Biden would have done better than Kamala Harris. But Gavin Newsom desperately wants to be president, and he knows that if he wants to be president, he has to do one thing. He has to shift himself to the right. Because right now, he is a radical leftist. He has taken a far left, extreme position on almost every issue that's important to the American voter, from the issue of transgenderism. He has taken, California is a sanctuary state for children who have been trans, meaning if you are a child and you come to California or one of your parents brings you to California, the other parent or both parents don't have any right to say, no, you can't undergo puberty blocking medication that chemically castrates you or undergo surgeries or social transition. The California state government will actually take custody of your child. That's pretty extreme. It's insanely extreme. There's a reason why over 80% of Americans think that that's wrong and bad and immoral and evil. And yet Gavin Newsom's fine with that. Gavin Newsom has presided over the border crisis in California. Gavin Newsom has signed bill after bill after bill into law that hurts Americans in California. He clearly neglected to clean up the forests in California, which is why the wildfires have been so devastating. Cleaning up the brush. That's all you got to do, Gavin. Clean up that brush. Make it so that wildfires don't spread like we just saw out in California. I have a good friend whose entire neighborhood was destroyed by these fires. His house was like the one house left standing. And even so, his windows blew out, and the first floor of his house is completely destroyed with soot. In a sense, it might as well have been burned down. This is Gavin Newsom. So he has to shift to the right in order to appeal to the 80% of America who thinks that all the policies that Gavin Newsom stands for are stupid. And so that's what his podcast is all about. His podcast is an interview format. He's interviewing people on the right. He's not interviewing his own friends. He's interviewing people like Charlie Kirk, people like Michael Savage, people who are pretty hardcore conservative, people who are pretty anti-radical leftist like Gavin Newsom. And so what I would like to discuss today and break down today is you and I are in the business of persuading. That's why I sit behind this microphone every day, is not only to speak truth, not only to make sure that reality has an advocate, but also because there are a lot of people who need to be persuaded of certain political policies or certain cultural norms or the implications of certain social policies, especially things that are unpopular. I'm in the business of persuading. I hope people listen and interact and watch this show, and I hope that they think differently after they're done watching. That's what we all hope. But here's the thing: how do you know if someone is persuaded? And what I mean by that is I don't want to sit here and not believe a leftist who watches the show when the leftist says, "You know what? You convinced me. You did it. I'm persuaded. I've changed my mind. I am reformed. I am redeemed. I'm different than I was." I want to believe that person. But how do you know if someone is actually persuaded? How do you know if someone's redemption is authentic? How do you know whether to accept them as one of your own or whether that person's being a fraud? Well, this concept, this construct is what we are going to analyze with Gavin Newsom. The first question to ask is, are they just lying? Are they lying about their redemption? Are they lying about being persuaded? The theme of this show, therefore, is actions speak louder than words. Words mean nothing compared to your behavior. So let's analyze just a little bit of Gavin Newsom's podcast. Speaking of COVID, by the way, which I think should be Gavin Newsom's legacy. Speaking of COVID, how can you trust anybody, any politician, especially Newsom, after what politicians like he and others did during COVID? Think about the ivermectin playbook that we talk about. I will never get over this, by the way. Never get over this. I will never stop talking about what they did with ivermectin. Ivermectin was effective against the COVID-19 virus. We knew this because studies showed it. We knew this because there was anecdotal evidence. And yet the Public Health Administration, politicians and doctors, pharmacists, and everyone on the left told us ivermectin's a horse drug, a cow drug, do not take it, even though we knew it worked. And the reason they told us that was not because they just mistakenly believed that ivermectin did not work against COVID. They lied to us deliberately because if they admitted that ivermectin was effective against COVID, they would not have gotten their emergency use authorization for their COVID mRNA jab. So lying is bad. Lying with an agenda like that is evil. Lying with an agenda for profit, I should say. Lying with an agenda for profit while you're harming people is the worst of the worst. And this is not an isolated incident. This playbook that they created with ivermectin and COVID, they're going to apply that to us again. And I refuse to be unprepared for this. That's why I am proud to partner with All Family Pharmacy. They offer over 200 different medications and bundled emergency packages to ensure that you are ready for anything before the anything happens. At the heart of this effort is the Make America Healthy Again movement, a call to take control of your health. Prepare for the unexpected. Do not let the Faucis and the Gavin Newsoms of the world dictate whether you have the medication that you need when you need it. And by the way, if you're not fully prepared, All Family Pharmacy has you covered with overnight delivery. Go check them out, allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Because you are part of this movement, use code Liz10 at checkout for an exclusive discount. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, code Liz10. Okay. So Gavin Newsom, let's start with a clip of his new podcast. And I think it will be very clear, quite clear, exactly why we know that Gavin Newsom is, as he always was, a liar. This is what Gavin Newsom had to say when he was speaking to Charlie Kirk about boys playing in girls' sports. Take a listen.
So like you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports,
right.
that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate
but like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that. There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address this issue with the kind of decency that I think, is inherent in you, but not always expressed?
He's such a slimy politician. Like, these politicians are so inauthentic. Okay. He says it's a matter of fairness. And for a second, you're like, oh my goodness, is Gavin Newsom red pilling? Is Gavin Newsom, the poster child of radical leftist politicians, is he about to change his mind on transgenderism? And the answer to that is no, not so fast. Not so fast. Actions speak louder than words. So Gavin Newsom said those words, but what is his action? Did he change any policy in the state of California? Anything related to protecting girls' sports? Well, no, he didn't. And he refused to say, he deflected and did the whole politician obfuscating thing. He refused to say that long jumper, that man that's playing in the girls' sport, should not compete, that is not a legitimate competitor, and that if that man wins, that he has taken the opportunity for the championship away from women. He did not say that. So his words are saying one thing, and his actions are saying another. But here's the real crux of the issue. It's not actually a matter of fairness, the idea of boys playing in girls' sports. Fairness, I don't even like the word fairness. Fairness is a bad word. It's like the word nice. We've talked about this on the show before. I hate the word nice. I hate the word nice because what does it mean? Like, what is it to be nice? What is that? Nice has nothing behind it. It's not kindness. Kindness is something. It's not love. Being loving is something. But what is being nice? Being nice has no definition, and it's often, because it has no real definition, it's often misused and misapplied. And people who think they're being nice are oftentimes, in the name of niceness, actually just being cowardly. Like, well, I want to be nice, so I don't want to say that a boy should not be in a girl's sports. That's not nice. Your actions should be motivated by, sure, being kind and being respectful of someone's dignity and the fact that they're made in the image of God, being loving. But being nice doesn't mean not saying something that might be difficult for somebody else to hear. So again, going off on a little tangent here, but it's an important one. I don't like the word nice, and I also don't like the word fairness. Fairness is that same kind of word. It's vague. It's nebulous. Like, what does fairness mean? What does fairness mean? A better word, and the word on which, two words actually, on which our nation is founded and our institutions are built, is the word justice. Justice. Justice is better than fairness. Equality of opportunity and equality under the law are better concepts than the nebulous, vague definition of what does it even mean to be fair. Fairness is not at the root of what's wrong with boys playing in girls' sports. Now, here's the thing. The reason that it's resonated with so much of us when we see boys and girls sports, even though you could argue on the spectrum of the transgender ideology, you have, at the most extreme and the most evil, you have children who have been transed by their parents, young children, 7, 8-year-old boys who've been put on puberty blocking pharmaceuticals, the same drugs that they use to chemically castrate sex offenders in prisons. Parents doing that to their children just to what? Virtue signal. That's the most evil. Doctors who are doing surgical double mastectomies on 15-year-old girls, ruining their chances, hysterectomies, removing their ovaries, sterilizing these young girls in the name of gender ideology. That is the most evil of this transgender ideology. Then, of course, you have teachers who are hiding from parents when they socially transition children in schools. That's, bad. Just a step lower than the chemical castration and the surgical mutilation of the bodies of these young children. And then you have when I say mild, it's still very bad, but at the mildest end of the transgenderism spectrum, you have boys and girls sports. It is not nearly as serious as chemical castration and physical surgery. So why does it resonate with us the way that it does? Why is this the issue that has given people permission to say, wait a second, we don't want that. We don't want boys and girls sports. That's dangerous to our daughters. That's unfair. Why is it that it wasn't the stories of teachers transing kids, and it wasn't the stories like Chloe Cole, someone who was transitioned as a child and regrets it? Why is it that it's not those stories that have resonated the most in our country? Well, I'll tell you why. It's not because we look at boys and girls sports and think, wow, that's unfair. We do look at it and think it's unfair because it is unfair. But the reason that we feel that it is unfair is actually built on a much deeper and a much deeper concept that you can define better. The reason we think it's unfair that boys play in girls' sports is because of our protective instinct of women. We as a society, not even as a society, as human beings, it doesn't matter what culture you're part of, we are protective of women. Women are shorter and physically less strong than men. We're softer, we're gentler. That's simply the facts of the matter. The simply basic biology. I don't need to explain to you. You know this. Men are faster, they're denser, they're rougher. There's a reason that women have been called the gentler sex, because we are. We are. It doesn't speak to our worth. It doesn't speak to our dignity. It is simply that men and women are different. So the reason that it resonates so much with so many people when we see boys and girls sports is not because of fairness. It's not because boys simply have a competitive advantage and we just don't think that's fair. This is about basic reality. It's about the fact that men and women are different, that boys cannot be girls, girls cannot be boys. That is the issue at stake here. The issue at stake is the truth, objective truth, and how we orient our society either towards that or against it. So let me give you an example. If we create rules in our society based on fairness or anything other than just truth and reality, it'll take you on a bit of a wild ride. So theoretically, you could find more developed girls that are stronger than boys, especially if you're talking like 12 or 13-year-olds. Maybe these girls have already gone through puberty themselves, but the boys haven't. Well, the girls could be faster than boys. I remember when I was a child, I was about 12 years old and I was still able to swim faster than the boys because they hadn't gone through puberty yet. It wasn't for a year or two that the boys were suddenly able to, lap me. But there was a moment in time that I was better than those boys because boys generally mature slower than girls do. Now, if you use Gavin Newsom's argument, it would be okay for the weakest boys to play against the strongest girls because, hey, it's fair. They're of equal competitive of stature. But again, basing anything on fairness is a dangerous act. In fact, not to sound like a parent here, but life is unfair. Fairness is completely subjective. It's a stupid concept. For example, you could argue that it isn't fair that some kids have parents who buy them personal trainers for their kids. But that doesn't mean those parents shouldn't be allowed to do that they should be banned or prohibited from hiring coaches, or, that wealth should be redistributed so that poorer families can afford personal coaches too. No. Trying to make things fair always leads to an outside actor, usually the government, infringing on the rights of other people. You could take it a step further and simplify it and say fairness is akin to socialism. Fairness is akin to equity, which is akin to socialism. And the government coercion that follows from trying to implement a fair society, that in and of itself always fails because it's never based on truth. It's never based on reality. It's based on ideology and control. And it leads to insanity, like boys playing girls' sports or claiming that men can be women. What actually matters here is the truth. The truth is that boys cannot play against girls, not because of hormonal imbalance or height or bone density, but because boys and girls are biologically and divinely different from each other. And recognizing those differences and building our society around it is the best way to live. I would argue it is the only way to live. Now, those differences between sexes always have been and currently are the cornerstone of our society. And as we get away from that, what have we seen? Our society has descended into chaos. That is where we are right now. So, all of that being said, do not buy Gavin Newsom's seeming rightward shift. It's not real. He's not shifting to the right. He doesn't understand the issue. He is pandering, as politicians do, pretending to be common sense and to be compassionate towards vulnerable communities while also acknowledging that there's a competitive advantage when boys play girls' sports. It's completely bogus because he misses the real issue. It's not an issue of fairness. It's an issue of reality. His transformation is fake. You can compare that, by the way. We have plenty of politicians who were once on the left and who have had a change of heart, a change of mind, a change of worldview, and a change of politics. Take Bobby Kennedy or Nicole Shanahan. They've genuinely shifted to the right. They want to make America healthy again by marrying Maha to make America great again. We can see that because it's not just their words, it's their actions. And the theme of today is actions speak louder than words. And on that, if you measure Gavin Newsom on that measuring tape, he fails abysmally. On that note, let's Maha together. Go buy some masa. Masa chips are free of seed oil, so you can eat them guilt-free, which if you're like me, my weakness has always been chips and salsa. If I had to pick one food that I could live on for the rest of my life, I know I should probably pick like spinach or something that's high in nutrients, but I would obviously pick chips and salsa. And yet chips are just quite literally saturated and fried in seed oils, except for masa chips. Masa has only 3 ingredients: organic, nixtamalized corn, grass-fed and finished beef tallow, and Redmond sea salt. No seed oils, No pesticides, no fake ingredients, no toxins. Did you know that all chips and fries, actually most fried foods, used to be cooked in tallow until the 80s and 90s when corporations switched to seed oils to increase their own profit? Now, that's bad because it's not healthy, but what they did that's really nefarious is they then pretended that seed oils are healthier than tallow. Well, that's not true. Heart disease has skyrocketed since this switch, as have obesity and every inflammation related condition. My husband loves these chips, by the way, and I've told you before, my sister was staying at my place about a month or two ago, and she sends me a text and she goes, "Hey, can your sponsor Masa Chips send some more of the spicy ones because I ate them all?" I encourage you to check out Masa Chips at masachips.com. Use my promo code Liz Wheeler for a discount. That's masachips.com. Promo code Liz Wheeler. Offer good on first-time orders only. Okay, now here's the other side of the coin. If people, politicians, folks like Gavin Newsom, who, by the way, is a politically savvy operator, this is just an observation, obviously not an endorsement. I think he's simply terrible. If folks like Gavin Newsom, politically savvy, are moving to the right or pretending to move to the right, we don't buy it, of course. Again, I'd be happy to debate Gavin Newsom on his COVID policies anytime you name the time. Governor Newsom. What are the true believers in Newsom's party doing? Well, the true believers in the Democratic Party are actually doubling down on their radical leftism, and they're moving even further to the left. And as they move to the left, their attempts to stop the mega mandate that you gave to President Trump when you elected him are becoming more and more embarrassing for them. And to be honest, I think I speak for you as well as me when I say it's really enjoyable to watch this. They seem really intent on using the heckler's veto. The heckler's veto is, of course, the most insecure form of censorship that exists, that is known to mankind. Think about a college campus event. If you go to a college campus event and there's a conservative speaker like me or anybody else, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, anybody who's on the Young America's Foundation speaker circuit, you'll go into this room. There'll be a podium and a mic and a stage. You'll be introduced. There's hundreds, if not thousands of college students in here eager to either hear what you have to say and agree with you or to disagree with you. There's the opportunity, this is important, there's the opportunity for them to come to the microphone after the speech and ask you a question to challenge you. It can be the hardest question that you've ever encountered. And yet, what do these leftists, these leftists, oftentimes students, although it's usually open to the public as well, what do they do instead of challenging at the mic after the remarks? Well, they disrupt. They yell. They try to drown out the speaker. And why do they do that? Well, it's not because they wouldn't have the opportunity to publicly state their dissent from your viewpoint. It's because they are so insecure about their own viewpoint, they don't actually think that they can disprove you. They don't think they can make their own argument and convince people of their own opinion. And so they use what's known as the heckler's veto. They're trying to drown you out so that nobody else can hear the points you're making. It's censorship, but it's the weakest, tiniest, most pathetic form of censorship. Now, if you're thinking, well, that reminds me of Congressman Al Green at President Trump's joint address to Congress. You're exactly right. That's what he did. The heckler's veto. He got the boot. This from JD Vance. This is like the best thing that I think JD Vance has ever done is you can tell that this vice president of ours, I would argue the best vice president of my lifetime, and perhaps even one of the best vice presidents in the history of our country. You can tell he's a good old boy from the Midwest, which I love because that's like something you'd see at a baseball game, something you'd see in a bar if some drunk guy got too much. Get him out of here. Get him out of here. And that's what JD Vance did when he was sitting behind the president next to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, when Al Green was angrily shaking his cane at the president. Great optics for the Democrats. Exactly what they want to be known as. Al Green looks homeless, shaking his cane at the president. Good argument. Good argument, sir. Well, he got the boot for attempting the heckler's veto during Trump's address. And he got the boot from Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who called the sergeant at arms and said, get this guy out of here. And now the whole House of Representatives has voted to censure him for his conduct. And they should. It's not appropriate behavior. It's not even just a comment that he yelled that you can kind of roll your eyes and say, just leave the toddler to his tantrum. Don't acknowledge this behavior. No. If you're going to disrupt to the point that the president has to stop his speech, you should face the penalty for that. But the Democrats, of course, and these are the people of Gavin Newsom's party, they're trying to stop the censure in Congress. Guess what they did to try to prevent this from happening? Guess what they did? They broke out into a song. Let's watch this.
Adoption of House Resolution 189. The House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
He's still shaking his cane. He's actually just a brat. What are they singing?
The House has come
well,
to order.
A
The House
choir
has
they
come to
should
order.
not be.
What's that?
Wouldn't you love if Speaker Johnson just turned to the aide to the side of him and he goes, "What's that?" And
The
I would
House
like
has
to
come to
believe that
order.
he's asking what they're singing because they're so bad at singing you can't actually even tell. They think that they're these like they're what is it, Tim? We shall overcome. Oh my gosh, that's so pathetic. My producer tells me they were singing "We shall overcome." Overcome what? What are you overcoming? Shake your cane a little bit more. I actually love it. I think that Al Green should go on every cable news show. He should constantly post on X shaking his cane because I don't think that he's going to persuade anybody. But this is their response. This is the Democrats' response. This is the best they can do. Well, of course, the reason that they engaged in the heckler's veto in the first place is because they have no actual argument. They cannot convince you that their policies are better than Trump's because they aren't. It's hatred of President Trump, pure and simple, which is hatred of you because you elected President Trump. They've got nothing else. They can't change their ways. They can't abandon their base, which is increasingly smaller. We are now facing in our nation something that I cannot remember ever facing, and that is we are facing an 80-20 situation. What is an 80-20 situation? An 80-20 situation is where 80% of the American people think that what Trump is doing is good. 80% of the American people support President Trump. 80% of the American people felt hopeful after watching President Trump's speech, his joint address to Congress. 80% of people want President Trump to doge the administrative state, to find the waste and fraud and abuse of taxpayer money and put that to a stop. And it's only a 20% minority who disagree with this. A 20% minority, and like the entire 20% are either in that congressional shot shaking their canes angrily or like crying like Rachel Maddow on air. That's the 20%. Now, Speaker Johnson recognizes this unique and unprecedented situation where Republicans not only have the mandate by nature of the fact that we voted for President Trump in huge margins, but that the American people right now, 6 weeks into the Trump presidency, are super on board with what President Trump's doing. He posted this on X last night. He said, President Trump's speech wasn't just a speech for the mainstream media. It was a speech for the American people. The way Democrats behaved was unserious. It was embarrassing. The contrast between our forward-looking vision and their temper tantrums was on display for all of America to see. Now, if you didn't watch the show yesterday that we did, I highly recommend that you do so because President Trump's speech, we did watch that. And President Trump's speech was great and entertaining, and he did a really good job. But the reason why it was so powerful was not necessarily because of soaring rhetoric and, and some kind of words, like highfalutin words. It wasn't that. It was because he used a tactic that I don't think has ever been used before in a speech of that magnitude. And it happened at the very beginning of his speech, where he looked at the Democrats and he said, it doesn't matter if I were to cure cancer or to solve all of our economic issues, you would never stand and applaud for me because you hate me more than you love your constituents. And so what he did for the rest of the speech after, and this was before the Democrats had refused to stand or applaud, but for the rest of the speech, every time President Trump highlighted something that you and I, 80% of the American people, objectively are delighted to see, the Democrats refused to stand and applaud. They didn't applaud for Laken Riley. They didn't applaud for Jocelyn Nungary, 2 women who were brutally killed by illegal aliens thanks to Joe Biden's open border policies. They didn't even stand and clap, for goodness sake, for that 12-year-old boy with brain cancer. I mean, the evil of these people, they didn't stand and applaud. They sat still in their chairs when President Trump said, every child, my message to every child in America is you are made perfectly the way that God made you. And Democrats didn't stand and cheer for that. It's just, it's so clear to the American people that we're facing a situation, a divide, a political divide that is not just left versus right, it is good versus evil. And Democrats are making that choice very clear. This contrast, especially between President Trump and the Democrats that night, was profound. And it's such a contrast because President Trump is articulating a very clear and very specific vision for the future of America. I don't remember presidents. I definitely don't remember this from Joe Biden. President Trump did this somewhat in his first term, but not compared to what he's doing in this term. Obama didn't do this. Bush didn't do this. Clinton didn't do this. Bush before him didn't do this. Reagan might have been the last president that articulated a vision as specific as what Donald Trump is articulating for the future of the United States of America. Now, the American people, of course, voted for that, for the vision that Trump is articulating. They want to see that vision implemented, not just that vision as soaring campaign rhetoric. And then we have Speaker Johnson. Speaker Johnson is correct that Democrats are embarrassing themselves. We enjoy watching it, and we hope they continue to do so. And what was great, of course, is that Trump simply let the Democrats speak in their own words. He didn't have to insult them, use ad hominems. He just let us hear them speak. And then polls and the election proved that the American people reject what the Democrats stand for. But all that being said, Speaker Johnson needs to be careful, and he needs to understand something. The people did not vote, really, for the Republican Party. The people didn't really vote for the GOP, especially as Speaker Johnson understands it. We, the people, voted for President Trump and President Trump's agenda. Trump was able to celebrate this because he alone has completed so many executive orders. But executive orders, theoretically, can be undone by the next administration or struck down in court, even on bogus grounds, as we saw last night with that Supreme Court ruling. Speaker Johnson needs to know that Republicans will only be able to grow their majority if they pass President Trump's agenda into law. And I'm sorry to say that that's a pretty big if. The American people are expecting results, and the American people are smart. So Johnson should not try to use America First language and then after using America First language, pass spending bills that fund leftist objectives or push for support for forever wars or amnesty or free trade deals that screw over the average American. We've said this before on this show, but America First and Make America Great Again cannot become the new family values. And what I mean by this is that in the wake of the Bill Clinton presidency, Republicans ran on restoring family values, protecting the sanctity of marriage, ending abortion, being morally decent public servants. But what actually happened after they promised all of that? Well, they failed to conserve the sanctity of marriage. They continued to fund Planned Parenthood. They didn't end abortion at all, really. And many of them were and are scumbags in their personal lives. And yet, even in the midst of their failure, they still tried to claim, I support family values, as the country went to hell in a handbasket. And the American people rewarded them for this hypocrisy by not voting for them. It took Trump's vision to not just save our country, but to save the GOP. And it will take the action of Republicans in Congress passing bills that protect our border, our language, and our culture to not only save America, but to ensure that we thrive for years to come. So my message to Speaker Johnson today is enough talking, get to work. Remember the theme of this show. Actions speak louder than words, and your actions leave a little to be desired. All right. Moving on to President Trump's tariffs. What are tariffs all about, really? There's this divide even among Republicans, even among conservatives. We're not just talking about rhino Republicans. Are tariffs essentially a tax? Are they going to hurt us? Are they going to make our products more expensive? Are tariffs an excellent economic maneuver on the part of the president? What are these tariffs all about? Is this a trade war that's brewing? What's going to happen? We've never experienced this before in our lifetime. Well, let's break it down today and talk about what we can expect from President Trump's tariffs. It is actually a very interesting conversation. Right now, legacy media and President Trump's neocon critics are only looking at these tariffs in terms of dollar amounts. And to a certain extent, you can't blame them because it is true that tariffs sometimes increase the cost of goods and services. But of course, the legacy media and President Trump's neocon critics are not doing this in good faith. So let's put a pin in that for just a moment. These are people who know the price of everything, but they know the value of nothing. Let me repeat that. These people criticizing President Trump's tariffs know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Cheap goods does not a country make. And they don't get that. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm not dismissing the fact that some products could get more expensive if Trump's tariffs continue. I invite you to consider this. In the 1990s, the American people were promised that NAFTA, trade with China, and globalization would lead us to a better life. We'll have cheap products, they told us, more luxuries, more democracy, they claimed. But what actually happened to the American people? Well, between the year 2000 and 2017, 5.5 million American manufacturing jobs left the country. As they left, Americans, especially American men who filled these jobs, suddenly lost the dignity of work. Now, Christianity teaches that all honest work has dignity. This is best exemplified by St. Joseph, a carpenter who worked so that he could provide for Mary, the mother of God, and for his foster son, Jesus. St. Joseph's life had meaning because he had a job to do given by God, and he said yes to God. He worked to provide for his family. So, what happens when your jobs are gone? What happens when men want to provide for their family because it's something innate that God put in their heart, that God intended for them, but they can't because there's no jobs to be had? What happens when you don't have meaning? What happens when men don't have purpose? As millions of Americans soon had, thanks to elites who promised that free trade would better their lives. What happens when the stress of life is too much to bear all around you as a result of not being able to find a job, to provide for your family, to fulfill who you were made to be? Well, what happens is you turn to things that provide relief from that crushing stress. You turn to things like drugs, which are readily available in our country. And that's exactly what happened. Between 1999 and 2021, more than 640,000 Americans have died from opioid overdose. 640,000. Those Americans became hooked on drugs. Why? Well, those communities, places like where Vice President J.D. Vance is from, were hollowed out and lost most of those manufacturing jobs that had previously sustained them. Thus, they lost not only their income, but a deeper meaning in life. So the elites said that increased free trade would make life better by giving us cheaper products and increasing our relations with China, with Canada, with Mexico. And we did, by the way, get cheaper products. We do have more luxuries, but you'd be hard-pressed to say that America and the American people came out on top. Our quality of life, by and large, has not improved the way that elites promised that it would. And those three countries not only took our jobs, but actively allow fentanyl and other opioids to come to our country to this very day. They profit from it. So what does this have to do with tariffs? How do tariffs play into this? This so-called trade war is part of an effort to get Mexico, China, and Canada to crack down on fentanyl production and stop the flow of this deadly narcotic and others into the United States. As mentioned, hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens have died over the past 20 years as a direct result of our so-called economic allies failing to stop such deadly poison from coming into our country. They look the other way. They enable this drug trafficking as hundreds of thousands of usually men, our husbands, our brothers, our sons, our fathers, our cousins, our friends, our neighbors die. President Trump wants to secure our borders, not only from illegal aliens, but from illegal drugs that are killing us. In fact, prior to announcing these tariffs, President Trump asked China and Mexico and Canada to crack down on this very drug flow. And what did they do? They didn't do it. Maybe they said they would, but what is the theme of this show? Actions speak louder than words. And it hasn't happened. Actions speak louder than words. We know President Trump understands leverage. We saw him interacting with Zelensky in the Oval Office. We know President Trump knows how to get a good deal. President Trump knows that these tariffs will force countries like Canada and China and Mexico into cracking down on the flow of fentanyl into our communities, our neighborhoods, our homes. At the same time, American communities who have seen production and business offshored for the sake of cheap goods have also seen that social degradation, the loss of pride for their members of their community, which is, again, why so many turn to drugs in the first place, to get that reprieve from the maladies created by their own government. So another goal of these tariffs is to bring back jobs, bring back manufacturing for these communities. That's why companies who invest in the United States, depending on certain conditions, will avoid these tariffs. We've already been seeing the benefits of this. It's almost immediate when Trump does something like this. Honda, for example, announced the other day that they're going to bring a plant to Indiana instead of Mexico. Why? Because of President Trump's tariffs. So the tariffs are not the end. They're the means to the end. And that end is creating a better way of life, a better quality of life for the American people. And if that sounds generalized, a better way of life, a better quality of life for you. Free trade in the free market, it's only beneficial in so much that it helps the American citizen improve his or her lot in life. It actually becomes detrimental to the American people. When it does, something has to change. And that change is coming in the form of President Donald Trump. It's being ushered in by these tariffs, yes, because that's what's necessary to get other countries to change their ways. President Trump understands every single word I said. In fact, listen to Peter Navarro say it. Take a listen.
What I want to say to every world leader who gets up in arms when all we're asking for is fairness and to have them stop killing our people is, please listen to us. Canada could do a lot more. Canada has been taken over, Brett, by Mexican cartels. They bring up these pill presses and printers and the medicines that they fake. You can't tell the difference.
Yeah, it's major
Pharma
problem.
companies can. You need a spectrometer to do it. It's crazy stuff. And people are dying, Brett. It's been going on for too long. And I'll give you another thing, just to make this point. It's like it all starts in China. But then China brings these chemicals over in 50-gallon drums. And you know what? When they get to the ports, you know why that stuff isn't interdicted there? It's because China owns the ports.
Peter Navarro, you could argue that he's the architect of the tariffs, although President Trump has said, I think he said it in his speech actually, that he loves the word tariff, a beautiful word he called it, and he has been pro-tariff all of his professional life, even before he was in politics. Peter Navarro deeply understands that cheap products and cheap labor are not the be-all and end-all. The be-all and end-all of the American way of life is having a life and having that dignity of life. Just stop killing Americans and the tariffs stop. That's it. That's all there is to it. All right, now for some headlines. This is a wild story. This was reported by Luke Rosiak. So this was maybe a month ago. It was right around the time that President Trump took office, right around his inauguration. So maybe it was as much as 6 weeks ago. I don't remember the exact date. We covered a story about a Kamala Harris staffer, an aide to Kamala Harris's presidential campaign, who had burrowed in, I think it was the Department of Labor. I should have looked up the details of this story, but I'm just thinking of it now. And when I say the word burrowed, burrowing is a term used when political appointees at the top of these administrative agencies in the federal government, the political appointees leave when a new administration takes office. It's the political appointees that are hired and fired by the president. And then the lower level employees in these agencies are known as civil servants. Hate that term, but that's what they're technically called. And the political appointees sometimes try to burrow themselves by taking a fake demotion to get into the ranks of the civil servants, so that these political appointees that should be fired when an incoming administration takes control of these agencies, these political appointees appear to just be civil servants, but they're still defying the new administration and carrying out the desires of the previous administration. There was a Kamala Harris staffer who tried to do this when President Trump took office. Kamala Harris's staffers are just openly defiant of the Trump administration. And there's another one who is now under DOJ investigation for allegedly falsifying paperwork in order to try to get the buyout that Elon Musk offered. And of course, this buyout has certain conditions that must be met. But this is from Luke, and this is from Luke Rosiak, who insinuates that this hiring conspiracy could involve Kamala Harris herself, as well as the ex-FTC chair Linda Khan. Let me read you a little bit of this, because this is a wild story. This is from Rosiak. A former top aide to Kamala Harris is now under criminal investigation, accused of forging paperwork to try to take advantage of Elon Musk's fork in the road buyout offer. The probe is likely to explore whether high-level officials, potentially including Harris herself and Linda Kahn, Joe Biden's chair of the Federal Trade Commission, conspired to embed Nathaniel Segal into a job at the FTC just before Trump's inauguration. The placement involved a series of maneuvers that appear to have been designed to evade personnel and ethics regulations, hide that Segal was a political appointee, and prevent the Trump administration from firing him, Rosiak writes. By the way, let me just jump in here. It's important to note that political appointees aren't allowed to burrow. They're not allowed because they're political appointees. They're supposed to be political. Civil servants are not supposed to be political. Huge eye roll. We know that they are. But political appointees aren't then allowed to pretend that they're these apolitical civil servants. So Rosiak says Segal, who worked as a deputy domestic policy advisor to Harris when she was vice president, was installed as deputy chief technology officer at the FTC on January 18th, 2 days before Trump's inauguration. He was placed on the payroll on direct orders of Kahn, despite the fact that he was missing essential paperwork about his career history, 3 Trump administration officials told Rosiak. But as the scheme began to unravel in mid-February, Segal tried to pull the ripcord by doctoring a document to try to secure the deferred resignation program buyout, despite its deadline having passed and Segal not having received the offer in the first place, the officials said. The buyout program gives eligible employees benefits worth as much as $200,000 in exchange for leaving the government. Now, that's the Doge program, by the way. The Doge deal was a pretty good deal. But it was also Segal trying to take the Doge deal, which he wasn't offered, in order to try to avoid accountability for trying to burrow, which he's not allowed to do because he was a political appointee for Kamala Harris. You can see this is a tangled web. These people, they're so greedy. They just want money and they want power. All right, Rosiak says a Department of Justice official speaking on condition of anonymity said that the department received a criminal referral from the FTC outlining Segal's alleged scheme. The official confirmed the department was taking a broad look at it. Segal did not return a request for comment. Well, maybe if you offer him a little money, a buyout deal, maybe he'll return that request for comment. Kamala Harris surrounded herself with people just like her, devoid of morality, completely devoid of morality. Speaking of people devoid of morality, Hunter Biden is broke. How does Hunter Biden not have any money when he was given tens of millions of dollars from bad people all around the globe? Didn't he have a thriving business selling his own artwork? But Hunter Biden claims he's broke. Apparently, he doesn't have any money. Maybe the big guy took all of it after he got out of office. This is from Politico. Hunter Biden broke. A pardon from his dad spared Hunter Biden from prison, but the former president's son remains saddled with debt and was forced out of a home he was renting by the recent Pacific Palisades fire. This is according to Politico. Biden detailed his grim financial situation in a court filing yesterday, saying that he has struggled to sell his paintings in recent months. Oh, let's just pause there. He's struggled to sell his paintings in recent months, has he? Huh. Well, maybe that's because, was he ever a talented artist? Was his work not appreciated for the deep messaging that he embedded into the beauty of that which he created? Oh, maybe not. Maybe he was selling these paintings because it was people's way of paying for access to his father. Would you look at that? He detailed this grim financial situation, Politico saying he struggled to sell his paintings in recent months, moving only 1 in the past 14 months compared to 27 in the prior 2 to 3 years. Do we have a list, by the way, of those buyers who actually bought his paintings? I would love to have the complete list of that. Politico says Hunter reported significant debts and lackluster sales of his memoir. Just more than 4,200 copies during a 1-year period that led up to the trial in Delaware last spring, in which he was found guilty of lying about his drug addiction on a federal gun purchase form. I didn't read Hunter's memoir. I didn't. I don't know if you guys did. Apparently only 4,200 people did. Hunter wrote, given the positive feedback and reviews of my artwork and memoir, I was expecting to obtain paid speaking engagements and paid appearances, but that has not happened. You can let me know in the live chat. Do you feel any sympathy for this guy? Do you feel sorry for him because his dad basically told him that he was something different? He told him, Hunter, you're desired, you're wanted, your art is great, your book will sell. Or do you feel like this guy is just so evil because he was the bag man for the Biden family crime syndicate? I'm torn. I'm it's like half and half. Part of me is like, oh man, you just never stood a chance. And the other part of me is like, evil coming home to roost. Anyway, Politico concludes by saying, citing the financial burden of ongoing legal fees, he's asking a federal judge in LA to allow him to drop a lawsuit he filed in 2023 accusing former Trump White House aide Garrett Ziegler of hacking the contents of Biden's laptop. I personally think he should be held accountable for all of his actions, regardless of his financial devastation. Poor Hunter. Poor baby Hunter. Poor baby Hunter. Speaking of babies, has he acknowledged the baby that he had yet? Oh, yeah, no, he's a bad person. There we go. Told you, it comes and goes. All right, that is all the time we have for today. Make sure you are subscribed at youtube.com/Liz Wheeler, at x.com/Liz_Wheeler on Apple Podcasts. Hit that subscribe button and leave me a 5-star review if you would. It helps boost us in the algorithm so others can discover the content and join the Liz Wheeler Show community, and on Spotify as well. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is the Liz Wheeler Show.